Good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are. It's Matt Coleman, your host from Magnify World. Today we have another very special guest coming all the way from San Francisco, and I'm speaking from our LA studio. We've got Leslie Shannon, who's the head trend scout at Nokia and also head of ecosystem. And tell us what trend scouting means in your world. You're obviously involved in 5G and AR to VR, and well, I've got a note here, visual analytics and next-gen gaming, AI, machine learning. It's all the emerging technology. So this should be a great conversation, Leslie. I'm looking forward to talking. How are you?
I'm just fine, Matt. Thank you so much for having me. And excuse me, you're right. The thing that when you list out those things like that, it actually sounds like quite a lot of like, wow, crazy, unrelated kinds of things. But the thread that actually goes through everything that you've been talking about is actually connectivity. You need connectivity for every single one of those things. And at Nokia, we are a connectivity company. And now most people actually know us because we used to make mobile phones. We sold that business to Microsoft in 2013. So we don't make them anymore. We do license the Nokia brand to another company that makes some phones that are largely for the India market. So there are still Nokia phones out there now, but that's actually not us. Our main business is something that we did also back during the handset days, which is we make the hardware and the software that actually runs networks. So our main customers in the world right now are the phone companies of the world. So we sell them the base stations that go up on the towers, the fiber that runs underground. We provide the actual hold it in your hand elements of connectivity. And so that's why we're into all of these things, because it's important for us to understand what are the new technologies that are coming that are going to need connectivity so that we can know how we need to be building our networks, and then, or rather, how the networks should be built, and then we can tell that information to our customers who then need to build these networks. Because all of these great things that you mentioned, they don't happen unless you've actually got the connectivity to make them happen. As we all learned when COVID started and we all came home and we're like, oh, I don't have enough bandwidth. So yeah, you need to have enough bandwidth, and you need to have the right bandwidth for all of those things that you just mentioned.
Yeah, interesting. So tell us, you've been with Nokia now for 20 years as of recently, I believe. So
Yes.
congratulations. Hopefully you got the gold watch or whatever else they give you, and a big bonus. But tell us about how you got into technology and what was your interest in innovation in the early days and what led you to be in charge of all of this.
My journey is an unusual one. I have a master's degree in the history of art from an Ivy League university, but then after I graduated, I went on to the game show Jeopardy, and I was a 5-time undefeated winner on Jeopardy, and I was profiled on the front page of the Wall Street Journal as I was a young woman who was winning this game show, and I got job offers as a result of that. And I ended up working not for Nokia, but I ended up working for a computer company, a computer outsourcing company, actually. And at one point, I had a choice where I wanted to go to work within that company. I had a choice between the healthcare division or the new mobile phone division. And I'm like, well, healthcare sounds awfully tedious. So, and mobile phone sounds like the thing of the future. So I ended up going into that. And through that company, I was actually sent to Australia. And it was in Australia that I was given by the same company that had sent me there a mobile phone, because my customer needed to be in touch with me, and it was a Nokia mobile phone. And I'm like, well, this is a great product. And Nokia's offices were actually just down the street from my house. And so I ended up working for them, and ended up going from Australia to Nokia headquarters in Finland, and I was there for 11 years. And then 5 years ago, I came here to California, and I was actually doing a different position here when I first got to California, but when you're in Finland, because Finland's a small country and very technically advanced, but Nokia is so dominant within the ecosystem there, within the business ecosystem, that everything really revolves around telco. And in Finland, telco is hot, new, and sexy. And I get to California and I'm like, oh, telco's kind of infrastructure-y and government-y. It's the way people see it here. I'm like, oh, we're not cool. Oh no. Okay, well, what is cool? And I started looking around and going, oh my God, there is a lot of stuff that's happening here that is super cool. And we in the telco industry, we're not paying attention to it. And the thing is that because I've been with the company for a long time, I actually was also part of Nokia during the decline and fall, the rise and then the decline and fall of the handset side. Now, I've always been on the network side, to be clear. And part of the reason that our handset side went down was that once we achieved 40% market share, global market share, which was kind of the goal of the company, Nokia started coasting and really took its eye off of the customer, the consumer, and we just kind of started focusing on our own fabulousness. And here's what we can do to the next mobile phone, and we lost touch with what people actually wanted to do with their mobile phones. So, for example, we had an app store, but it was a nightmare to use. It was really, really difficult. And email was really hard. We hadn't solved these really basic things. And so as a result of that, I learned, if you don't solve your customers' problems, other companies will come into those gaps and solve them for you, and your customers will go to those companies. So I came out to California. When I came out to California, I looked around and I'm like, okay, there's a lot of things happening here that we aren't looking at in the telecommunications industry. If we don't solve these, other players will. And if we don't build our networks to support these things, other things will come up. So we need to stay current. We need to stay on top of things. So I just started reporting on what I was seeing. And Nokia is a flexible company. And they said, oh, you know what? That reporting that you're doing, that is actually more valuable than the job that we originally had you doing. Why don't you just make that your full-time job? And so here I am. So that was a very long answer to a very short question.
Fantastic. So, I know we just talked about the new Apple iPhone, and tell us about why you're excited outside of the 5G aspect, and how can a consumer use some of these applications that are on the new phone?
Yeah. Okay. So, well first of all, Apple releasing a 5G phone is fantastic, because for people to actually use, because I've been with Nokia through 2G and 3G and 4G and now 5G, and each time we get a new G, we go through the same kind of effort to get people onto the network and get people using it. And there's always a period where you've heard of everything, but not everybody's there yet. For people to actually use a new G, and 5G is no different, you need to have a handset that supports it, and you need to turn it on. So you need to not be afraid of anything about using it. You need to be in a place where the network actually exists, and you need to have a rate plan that allows you to access the network in a way that is affordable to you. If you are missing any one of those three elements, then you don't have connectivity to the network. And it's always a several-year period for all of those things to come into play. But having an Apple 5G phone, that's fantastic, because a lot of people will acquire that phone for reasons completely other than the 5G. But that helps them then actually solve, it gets the hardware into their hand. So then it's up to the phone companies to then build the network out so it is where it needs to be, and then to get the rate plans out so that any, Joe average can actually really, turn on the 5G on his phone and use it. But 5G is a little bit different from the other Gs. It makes it a little more of a challenge. And I do want to talk about the other thing about the iPhone. I haven't forgotten about that. But just while I'm here, quickly, all of the Gs before, the spectrum, the area, different frequency bands of the radio, for 2G, 3G, and 4G, they were each set in particular spectrum bands. And so, 2G is here, and 3G is here, and 4G is here. And they're all kind of in the middle of the available spectrum. But each G solves the problems of the G before. And one of the problems with that is that some countries, I think it was Ukraine, they were never able to use 3G because the military was in that band and they never got out of it. So being limited to particular bands was actually a problem when you're looking globally. So one of the things about 5G is it can actually be used in any spectrum band. And so that's new. But it also means different spectrum bands have different properties. So the low spectrum band, those are low wavelength that travel very far, but they don't carry a huge amount of data. But if you want to do rural coverage, low spectrum makes a ton of sense. You can cover big areas and get kind of 4G-like performance. Then there's the really high spectrum bands, which are called millimeter wave. And those are, they can carry a huge amount of data. They're very high frequency, but they're such high frequency that they can't go through anything. The low slow can actually travel through, long distances and travel through things. The really high spectrum bands, like a leaf will stop it. So it's really point of sight only. And then you've got 5G kind of in the middle in the spectrum bands that are more where the 2G, 3G, 4G stuff sits. So the different phone companies around the world and in the US, I've seen like newspaper reports like, 5G is just, it's no better than 4G. Well, in the low spectrum bands, yeah, it's going to be that way. But the high spectrum bands is different. So without getting too much into it, you need to know which spectrum band you're in to know what kind of a performance you can be getting. But all that aside, back to the iPhone question. The other thing I was so excited about, so I'm watching the announcements from Apple, and I'm like, I do have an Apple phone, and I'm, very, very happy with it. And I'm like, but I don't need to upgrade. No. I'm like, well, 5G. Maybe, yeah, I really should have a 5G phone, shouldn't I? And I'm like, okay, maybe I can get the mini. I don't really need to splash out on this. And then they start talking about the Pro, and I'm like, oh, all that camera stuff. Okay, that's not so me. And then they talk about LiDAR, and I'm like, oh. Okay, I have to get this phone. That's the thing that sold it for me. Because one of the huge things, the most significant thing that I'm tracking right now as a trend scout is, house happening in the background here, so apologies for the background noise. But the thing that's one of the most exciting things that I'm seeing is the development of the spatial internet, which is the concept of taking having a 3D model of the world that you can then hang information on, that you can actually experience information and entertainment when you're actually in those locations. And, and initially, looking through the camera of a phone, and then eventually through augmented reality glasses or some other kind of viewing thing. And so the companies, there's a lot of companies that are working on this right now. Facebook, Google, Niantic, the Pokemon Go company, Microsoft, and who did I forget? Google, Facebook, Microsoft, Google, Niantic, Apple, of course, Apple. And so what they're all doing is they're actually working on that 3D mapping of the outside world to actually create the foundation of the spatial internet. And Facebook Connect, the developer conference a couple of weeks ago, they were very clear about all of this, what they're doing there. But a lot of the kind of augmented reality sorts of things, particularly for media and entertainment, is probably going to be happening indoors. So how do you actually map people's indoors? And putting LiDAR on somebody's phone is how you do that. So now, if I can have a phone that can actually map my surroundings, now when the opportunity for developers to put really fabulous augmented reality things on that new iPhone 12 Pro, I'm there. I have to get that phone. This is not an official Nokia endorsement for Apple products, by the way. This is me.
Yeah, sure.
Clear.
Sure. Let's just talk about some examples in really we're talking about gaming would be an excellent example for indoor use. Obviously, we're yet to see, what can be done in the coming year or two with the product. But just 5G is, faster than lightning, really, if you're in the right spectrum, as you said. So, yeah, where are the advantages for the media and film and television markets and companies like, streaming services like Netflix and things like that?
Okay, so the key thing about 5G is, and quite often, it's like, well, okay, well, people are excited about 5G. Well, why? It's like, okay, sure, it's faster, but we've had faster before. The thing about 5G is not only that it's faster, but it also has lower latency, so a shorter ping time between me and the server. So now that we have these super short latencies, that actually allows what I call splitting the chip. And because if you think about it, right now, the devices that we have, this phone, and the iPhone 12 Pro that I'm probably just about to buy, they are expensive, and a big part of the expense is the cost of the chip in here. This is a supercomputer. There's more computing here than the spacecraft that went to the moon, right? And the gaming console also, there's a chip in there that is expensive. And if I want to have an augmented reality headset that looks like this, well, where are you going to put a chip? There's no room for a big chip here or a big battery pack. So we've got to actually think about slimming down the chip for both for cost and for battery life purposes, for weight, for size, for heat. And so the thing is that 5G is fast enough, and the speed, the latency, the bing bing back and forth speed, is short enough that now, for the first time, we've got the possibility of splitting the chip. So putting the tiniest minimum amount of processing necessary on the end device, and then have 5G connect to effectively what is the rest of the chip, right? And where's it connecting to? Oh, well, the network. So but if you're actually sticking the rest of the processing in the network, you don't have to have it be a single chip. You can have a stack of, like for example, a gaming console has one GPU in it, one graphical processing unit. If I've now got a minimum amount of processing on the end device, I can connect to not one, but 40 GPUs. That's the kind of stuff that NVIDIA is putting in their edge cloud stack. And so you hear the term edge cloud, and that's what that means. That means so what 5G does is it enables the split between the minimum processing end device, which gets you something lighter, cheaper, longer battery life, and then more processing in the network nearby in that edge cloud. It's called edge because it's at the network edge instead of having to go all the way through the network to some server deep within the internet. And it needs to be at the edge because we are limited by the speed of light in terms of how quickly the electrons and the messaging can go. And when you're actually talking about sending something over miles and miles and miles, even if you're talking about going through fiber optic, you're limited by the speed of light. And if I'm actually pinging a server in Hong Kong, that's going to add processing time. And so the server needs to actually be quite close to me so I can get the rendering that's going to be necessary for me as a Fortnite player on a light, inexpensive end device that everybody can afford, particularly India, the Philippines, and Indonesia, which is where the cloud gaming companies are aiming. And so I've got this affordable end device, but now I've got all the power. I'm connecting to a stack of 40 GPUs, and so I can get things like ray tracing and much better rendering than was ever possible before. And so that's the magic of 5G. It's that split chip giving you a cheaper end product, but accessing a much more powerful processing stack overall. And for example, I just saw yesterday in the UK, British Telecom, BT Sports, they are actually, they've announced that they're exploring the possibility of doing television-related things for their sports. So, for example, you're watching a boxing match on TV, and you can actually have volumetric video, so holograms of the boxers, punching it out live on your coffee table in front of the TV in coordination with that television broadcast. And, and they're talking about using the director signals actually in the broadcast to coordinate with this volumetric video that you're watching in your home through augmented reality glasses. That's the kind of stuff that 5G enables.
I think that's a great case study for sure. I think sports, home, living it and breathing it. You saw some of the Microsoft HoloLens promotional videos. You had the NFL player bursting through the wall, and you've got all sorts of VR experiences, that enable you to collaborate. But let's just talk about education and collaboration outside of entertainment and sports. I mean, this is obviously a massive problem right at the moment because of the world markets, but 5G is being promoted in the US really heavily in the last year, particularly with Verizon and AT&T and T-Mobile, I guess. Where is it all going in regards to education? Have you seen many applications and, for global collaboration or even regional collaboration here with students? I mean, how can we solve some of the problems that we've got with 5G around that?
Yeah, the one, okay, there's a lot of problems with the lockdown and everything. One of the like, oh shucks, if it had to happen, it's a shame it happened right now, because from a hardware point of view, we're just a little bit too early in term, because not that many people have, for example, VR headsets or AR or anything. If this had happened like 2 years later, then we would have like far more hardware out there. Also, the 5G networks would be up in place, and so COVID has definitely slowed all of that down. But having come from the mobile phone industry, I actually see VR and AR developing along a very similar path to the way that the mobile telephony developed back in the 90s. As I mentioned, my first mobile phone, it was actually given to me by my company. It was not something that I personally went out and bought, and they gave it to me so I would be able to do my job more efficiently. And we're really seeing that same kind, and it was a little bit heavy, it was a little bit expensive. I didn't feel like I needed it, but once they gave it to me and I started using it, I'm like, oh, this is actually pretty cool. And if we think about it, the first mobile phones, they let you make phone calls. That was it. So even the early, they didn't even have text messaging at the start. And then, later comes text messaging, and then comes Snake, and then you start getting data with WAP, and like, oh, right. And then over time, it evolves into the full-blown consumer device that it is now. And it's been such a significant change that we kind of forget that the initial ones were really, it was a company thing. And the same kind of thing is happening with AR and VR right now. So the headsets that are out there right now for both of those, they're a little expensive. They're a little bulky. You wouldn't put it on and wear it all day. You would put it on to do a particular task. And if your job tells you that you need to wear it, well then, okay, I'm going to wear it. So the early stuff that we're seeing now is all corporate for that reason. And it's brilliant stuff. So you mentioned training. I actually just saw a use case from Lufthansa Cargo, because passenger plane flights have gone, nobody's flying passenger planes anymore. But because we're not moving, cargo needs to come to us. And so cargo plane traffic is up. Lufthansa is having the best year of their cargo that they've ever had. But they need to be training people how to do things like loading difficult cargo, like if you're shipping a car or a giraffe, or something. They need to train the people how to put that stuff in the plane. And they're actually using, mixed reality, actually, because they can't bring people together to do the training in person. And so what they're doing is they're shipping mixed reality headsets. I think they're using the HoloLens to the places where the people are, and then the people can actually go through the training themselves and get accredited in this mixed reality. And this works particularly well for remote airports that maybe don't get a car coming through every day. And anyway, so AR and VR are excellent for training for difficult, dangerous, or expensive kinds of tasks that are difficult to replicate in training scenarios for those three reasons. And so that's really booming. There's just a ton, and that COVID has absolutely accelerated. I was actually talking to an energy company and saying that they've been able to drastically reduce the number of people they need to have on site doing any particular task in terms of maintaining an energy facility, of any kind, or installing new things or doing upkeep, because they can actually have, headgear that the few people on site are wearing, and then they are able to connect to the rest of the team. So it's not like, it's not that people are being fired; they just don't need to be on site, and the rest of the team could be sitting in some safe place where they're not catching anything, and they can be seeing what the other people are seeing, and they can still work as a team and do the job that needs to be done, but just with far less exposure to dangerous situations. So as I said, that is totally booming, and then over the next couple of years, as we get the networks in place and as more handsets come out and as the rate plans become something that, everybody, I don't even know if I don't even know if I got a 5G phone, I have to go check with my phone company and see if I need to do anything special to activate it. And so all those things need to be in place. And over the next couple of years, that will happen. And that's when we're actually going to start to see this kind of specialized stuff that's happening kind of niche for enterprise become more mainstream, and particularly getting at a price point when schools will actually be able to really make these things available to everybody.
It's a great thing. I've seen a massive growth in the companies we talk to in training, whether it's an astronaut, but right through to, as you said, a dangerous occupation. They can train in safety, which is fantastic. Let's just go back to next generation gaming for a moment, because all the new, phones are coming out 5G enabled. Back in on that conversation, but surely we're probably going to see a new generation of mobile games, right? And we need another Pokemon Go in the AR sector to explode out of the blocks again. When do you think that's going to happen?
It's well, one of the things that I've got my eye on is Microsoft has a beta version out there right now of Minecraft Earth, which is a Pokemon Go kind of thing, except it's actually mixed reality. So that when you get to what they call adventures, you're looking through the camera on your phone and you place the adventure on a flat space, and then it actually it visually integrates with the world that you have around you, and then you can interact with it by tapping on your screen. And so things like that are actually going to be really, really fantastic. I think one of the first things that we're going to see, and this actually, in terms of gaming, and this actually sounds kind of simplistic, but it's going to be very important, is just plain mobility. I have a 15-year-old son who he's a competitive Fortnite player, and so he's good enough to win money in tournaments and stuff. And Fortnite, yeah, there's enough money that it's an incentive, and so he basically never leaves his room. So unless we force him to walk the dog. And SKT, one of the phone companies in South Korea, they just recently launched a partnership with Microsoft to get kind of cloud gaming into over 5G into their handsets. So you can actually, and so the key right now, if I'm playing, because I can get Fortnite on my mobile, but if it's running over 4G, I can't compete with the people who are playing with a console or a PC because 4G network is not fast enough, right? So it's not competitive. The only mobile phone game right now that is actually it's competitive standard is PlayerUnknown Battleground, PUBG. That's the only one. At least that's what I heard when I went to TwitchCon last year. Although they're like, that's the only mobile one that's worth playing. So when SKT actually, they did, a year's worth of beta testing to make sure, because, if your connectivity glitches at all when you're in a competitive situation, you lose. Somebody shoots you and you die if you're hung up at all. And so gamers are enormously sensitive to latency, and 4G is not good enough for that. 5G is, but the network has to be tuned for it, and you have to be in the right kind of spectrum band, as I mentioned. So it's not just any 5G will do. So, and the thing that SKT found when they did their year's worth of beta testing, because they wanted to make absolutely sure that before they launched it, that they actually had a gaming-worthy network out there. Because, like I said, not just any 5G will do. It has to really be optimized for gaming. What they found was that the competitive players, 45% of the gaming usage was actually done out of the house. Turns out the gamers do want to leave their bedrooms every now and then and be able to still have access to their competitive level of connectivity when they're out of their bedrooms. And that's significant, because if you're a competitive Fortnite gamer, now you can actually travel. And okay, well, maybe not travel right now, but at least go somewhere else and still be able to be competitive. And so, like I said, that kind of mobility, that's actually going to unleash a whole bunch of other activity. But then, as you mentioned, having the 5G connectivity power with that kind of nascent spatial internet, that mapping of the world, not just the street mapping that we have right now. If you look at in Pokemon Go, it's a flat 2D map, but having a three-dimensional map of the world. Now what starts happening is the ability of being able to not just walk someplace and then see Pikachu through the camera on my phone, but if the processing on my phone being connected to the network, if it can have a 3D mapping of the environment around me, then it can actually visually repaint what I see so that it looks like something else. And KDDI in Japan, they're actually doing this with their 5G launch. They launched 5G back in March, and they partnered with Nreal Glasses, the AR glasses company out of China, and they put 5G all around Shibuya Ward in Tokyo. So if you go to Shibuya and you put on your 5G glasses, and right now the Nreal glasses actually connect with a cable to a 5G capable phone, because they haven't done that chip splitting there yet, but they will. And you go to Shibuya, they actually have partnered, I believe through Netflix, with the Ghost in the Shell property, which is, I know it through the Scarlett Johansson movie a bunch of years ago. In Japan, it's a franchise with a very long history. I think the original Ghost in the Shell came out in the 80s, and it's a franchise that's still going. And so what happens is, you're in Shibuya and you see the buildings around you, and you put on the glasses, and you can now have an experience where you are interacting with the Ghost in the Shell characters who are coming to you and talking to you. And the storyline is that somebody has hacked the city of Tokyo, and the visuals around you, everything now, it becomes digitized, and it starts glitching. And so it's effectively repainting everything that you're seeing. So now just kind of imagine, what you're seeing behind me. Imagine everything kind of starting to glitch and fritz and tweak and start going different colors. That's the kind of thing that we can do with augmented reality glasses. When we have 5G and we have the ability to understand that 3D map of where people are, now we can replace it with whatever we want. We're talking about different levels of reality. We're talking about unlimited potential here, particularly for the entertainment and media industries. And I am so excited. I cannot wait to see what comes.
Good summary. I was actually going to ask you to finish up and actually share your thoughts on what you think is a perfect world, but I think you just had a go at that. But look, everybody's looking for smart glasses, and I wish they were, 5 years ahead as well. And I wrote an article a few years ago, probably 4 years ago now, for CIO Asia on the future of shopping. And of course, smart glasses was all the where are they back then? Now they're here. I mean, what's a perfect world for someone working at Nokia, and powering the networks? What's a perfect world from a business perspective?
Right now at Nokia, we're really it's a big job to get the 5G networks out across the world, and so that's really what we're focused on right now. And so for us, kind of the AR and VR and everything that's coming, that'll kind of be our next level of attention. But of course, there's tons of companies out there that are working on the AR and the VR right now. And so bringing all these things together is the work that's being done right now. But I don't know about a perfect world, because that's a pretty big ask. But I can tell you that my vision of 2030 is a vision in which smartphones actually are no longer central to our existence. Right now, all of our computing is done mediated through screens and keyboards to some extent. And what we're really going to be seeing with the advent of 5G and that splitting the chip, we're going to be actually accessing our computing through much more intuitive and much more kind of close to us kind of devices. And so it's going to be a combination of if a computer is sitting actually on your face, then it's seeing the world the same way that you are. And this is a point that Facebook made in their Facebook Connect stuff recently quite well. But also the ability for the the thing sitting here to understand your gestures and to understand your voice. And so it becomes a much more intuitive way of actually accessing your computing of all kinds. And that also opens up computing. If it becomes more intuitive, that opens up the possibility of computing for people who are a little bit shut out of it right now for whatever reason. I have elderly parents, and one really kind of scary thing that has happened is they both used to be fairly technically savvy, and now they can't remember how to work the internet. Like even Google search is beyond them. So all of the wonderful things that are out there, they can't access because they can't even, they can't figure out a smartphone. So, Uber's not available to them, and all these things that would actually be great services for them, they can't get to. But if we make it glasses and we make it voice-based and we make it gesture-based, then they can actually start playing again. And that's that for me, where we've got not only pervasive computing, but intuitive computing that is at a price point and an availability level that everybody can access it. And so it becomes the baseline. Okay, maybe perfect isn't too strong a word to use for that world.
Look, great summary. And Leslie, thanks very much for your time today. It was a fun and stimulating conversation, of course, every time.
Well, thank you, Matt. I think I let you get about 5 words in. Word count. Matt 5, Leslie 20 million.
So one thing I should end on is that someone had called you someone who's in love with the new, and there's a word for that called Novophiliac.
Right, it's a Novophiliac. Right, exactly. And I am absolutely in love with the new Novophilia right here.
Fantastic. And where can people find you, Leslie? Are they best to connect with you on LinkedIn here?
Absolutely. So I'm the only Leslie Shannon at Nokia. So if you put in Leslie Shannon Nokia, you'll get me.
Fantastic, and great to catch up, and thanks very much for your input today.
Matt, thank you so much for the opportunity to talk to you. It's always a pleasure.